Hello and welcome to Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports for the review of qualifying in Silverstone. And what a qualifying session that was, with a lot of shakeups from the bottom to the top of the grid. Just getting it out of the way straight away. Max Verstappen takes pole position. That is not necessarily any shock to any of us. I mean, yeah, he's had such a dominant season so far, taking yet again another pole position. Who was a bit of a shocker though was Lando Norris, who took P2, the second car on the front row of the grid here today, followed closely behind by his teammate Oscar Piastri. The rookie finishes his qualifying session in Silverstone P3. Absolutely fantastic session from both of the McLarens. I mean, brilliant weekend for McLaren so far. Just showing a lot of pace with their upgraded cars. Certainly, they will be very ecstatic down in their grid box and in their pit box, because wow, so much work has gone into those cars and it certainly seems to be paying off. Going further down the grid then, we have Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz for the Ferraris, finishing in in P4 and P5 respectively. Then George Russell P6, Lewis Hamilton P7. Not the greatest day for the Mercedes, certainly a bit of a damage limitation for them in a weekend that they certainly were thinking that they were going to be quite competitive. So far, they haven't necessarily shown that they are very competitive in qualifying trim, at least. Possibly, we will be seeing them becoming a bit more competitive. Well, we hope for the race. They certainly had some good race pace in them on Friday afternoon. So hopefully we will be seeing that come in to fruition tomorrow afternoon, or today if you're watching the race today. Yeah, we'll be hoping to see them having a good race in Silverstone, which is their home Grand Prix. Then moving on to Alex Albon, one of my standout drivers of the season so far, having yet again another fantastic qualifying session, putting himself into P8 in that Williams. Both of the Williams seeming to have had a very good qualifying session today. Logan Sargent did have a better qualifying 2 session, but then unfortunately his lap time was deleted and he was eliminated. But then moving our way after Alex Albon, we have Fernando Alonso, not having the greatest day in his Aston Martin. They certainly would have been wanting to perform a little bit better today, as it is also a home Grand Prix for them. Their factory is based half a kilometer away from the Silverstone circuit, so they will be a little bit disappointed. But off the back of Austria and Spain, they haven't necessarily been having the greatest few races. I mean, just been a little bit off the pace, certainly to what we would have been expecting for Aston Martin. But nonetheless, he has put himself into P9 for the Aston Martin car. Then in P10, we have the first of the Alpines. Pierre Gasly puts himself into P10, matching with his race number P10, or 10 that is. Yeah, not too bad from the Alpine. Certainly expected them to get a little bit higher, but nonetheless, not too bad. Then we have Nico Hulkenberg for Haas, putting himself in P11. Not bad for that Haas. Then Lance Stroll, the second Aston Martin, a couple places off of his teammate, 3 places off of Fernando Alonso. We'll have to see what those two Astons can do in the race tomorrow. They historically have some very good race pace, so don't take your eyes off of them in the race tomorrow, especially Fernando Alonso, who, I mean, you can never count him out, that wise old fox Fernando. Then moving further back, we have Esteban Ocon in 13th place. Logan Sargent, the second Williams, in 14th after having that lap time deleted in qualifying 2. We then have Valtteri Bottas, P15. Unfortunately, Bottas was unable to set any lap times in qualifying 2 due to his car dying at the end of quali 1. We just saw him pull off to the side after turn 8. Car completely stopped on the side of the track. That delayed qualifying 2 getting underway because his car had to be recovered. But nonetheless, we did get underway, and going on from him, we have Sergio Perez having an absolute shocker yet again in a qualifying session. This is, I think it's the 4th or 5th qualifying session. Let me just check my notes here. I think it's the 5th qualifying session that he has not finished in qualifying 3. I mean, dismal for him. Just going back on my notes here, Monaco he finished qualifying in P20, Spain 11th, Canada 12th, Austria 15th, and now Britain, Silverstone 16th. I mean, absolutely dismal for Perez so far. It's very confusing because he's had a brilliant start to the season and now has just lost his momentum a bit. It's quite sad to see him not being able to extract all of the performance out of the car, but it also just shows that Max Verstappen doesn't necessarily have everything handed to him. Then moving on from Sergio Perez in 16th, we have Yuki Tsunoda 17th, Zhou Guanyu 18th, Nick de Vries unsurprisingly right at the back of the grid, P19, and then Kevin Magnussen, who wasn't able to put himself any further up the grid, as he also had a bit of an electronic issue in his Haas, and he was pulled over to the side of the track, caused a red flag in qualifying 1, and unfortunately was not able to set any representative times for himself, and he will start the race in P20. I'm sure he will probably start from the pit lane. I would imagine that Haas will put a few upgrades on the car, maybe put a new engine or gearbox in. They may as well take those grid penalties because they are starting from last anyways. It was a very interesting qualifying session though, especially with the weather that we had. Qualifying 1 was mixed conditions. We had a bit of rain that made its way through, which certainly made it a little bit tricky for drivers out there. Lewis Hamilton having a big spin quite early on in that session, then having to abandon, possibly also go and put on a new set of tyres, and then he did get a good banker lap in, thankfully, before that red flag did come out. The red flag is probably one of the reasons that Sergio Perez was dropped out from this first session, due to the fact that he only had 3 minutes left once that red flag was removed. He only had 3 minutes left to get another hot lap in, and unfortunately he was right at the front of the queue, didn't get the evolved track at all, and yeah, he starts P16. Then moving on to Q2, still a bit of intermittent rain, few spots, not too bad. The track was drying out a bit, so we saw the times starting to drop quite a lot better. I mean, Max Verstappen set the first 1:17 in that second qualifying session. We started to see the true pace of those McLarens and the Williams. I mean, the Williams at one point was P1. Alex Albon just putting in a great qualifying lap. But of course, Max Verstappen then hooking his car up yet again and putting himself P1 in Q2. But then Q3 is where it all really mattered. We had a completely bone dry track. Great running out there. Lots of times just tumbling there, people fighting for that top spot. Max Verstappen early on got that number 1 spot, and then we had a few drivers taking it away from him. We had Lando Norris, who was sitting provisional pole for a little bit. I say for a little bit because it was only a matter of maybe 10 seconds, if that, and then Max Verstappen just came and took it away again. It did look, though, like Lando Norris was going to be given that, not necessarily given, but earned that number 1 spot, but then Max Verstappen, as I said, took it away at the last second. Verstappen's lap wasn't necessarily the fastest that he's had all weekend long, but just being able to take that pole position in the final few corners, because his first and second sectors weren't necessarily all that good, but the third sector was well hooked up there, and he was just able to take that fastest lap time. Well, that is the qualifying session all wrapped up. I hope you do enjoy the race that we have ahead of you. It is going to be a very exciting race ahead. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow for more Formula 1 content. I've been Reese, and this has been the qualifying review. Cheers.